the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Justice.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and I want to start by acknowledging I'm speaking to you virtually in the House of Commons from my home in Toronto, which is on the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, Huron-Wendat, Anishinaabe, and most recently the Mississaugas of the Credit. I want to acknowledge that I'm speaking about Budget 2021, which is a historic budget also tabled in a historic manner by Canada's first ever female finance minister. And what a budget it is, Madam Speaker. It canvasses a wide number of areas, and I propose to go through some of them, but not all of them, because there is so many supports that are literally contained therein. I'm going to pick up on the environment, which is a subject matter that my colleague, the member from that part of Nova Scotia, just left off on, which is the environment. We know as a government and as a party that climate change is real. We've taken serious measures to act on climate change, Madam Speaker, during the course of our tenure as government over these past now almost 6 years. We've invested nearly 60. What we've done so far is invest nearly $60 billion, and that has been added to with this current budget. What this budget allows us to do is get to a path whereby GHG emission reductions based on the 2005 levels would be reduced by as much as 36%. And I outlined this number right at the outset because we heard a lot from criticism, sometimes very constructive criticism by opposition parliamentarians and others, that we need to set targets that are more ambitious, particularly more ambitious than the Harper Conservative government that we succeeded. And we have done that by setting targets of around 32% this past December, and now setting a path to getting to 36% in reductions, and getting on a path to get to net zero by 2050, which is really, really critical, Madam Speaker. We're doing that by increasing the dollars that we are putting in. So there's $15 billion of new money that was allocated in 2020 at the end of December. And in the most recent budget, there's an additional $17.6 billion that is being dedicated towards the green recovery. And in particular, I'm going to highlight one other feature, Madam Speaker, which is the Net Zero Accelerator. And what that does is it allows companies to invest in how they can reduce their own greenhouse gas emissions. We put $3 billion into that accelerator in last December's announcement made by the Minister and the Prime Minister, and we're adding another $5 billion in this announcement. On top of all of that, Madam Speaker, there's also money that is put in place to help us achieve our land conservation and marine conservation targets of 25% of areas by 2025. So that is simply just on the environmental piece, Madam Speaker, and the budget also outlined, again, reaffirming our commitment to continue to escalate the price on carbon pollution and to continue to escalate the climate action incentive rebate, which will continue to go to Canadians, not just on an annual basis, but on a quarterly basis, which is, I think, really important to underscore, given that the official opposition's bright idea on climate is to eliminate such rebates. Madam Speaker, next subject, housing. And I start with these two subjects because I represent the constituents of Parkdale Park they talk to me all of the time about progressive policies, about issues that affect them and affect this part of Toronto. And climate and housing are at the top of the agenda in almost all conversations I have with my constituents. I'm very pleased to say that not only is this budget responding to those concerns of my constituents that I've advocated for with the Minister of Finance and with the Prime Minister, it is responding not just to the environmental concerns, but also to the housing concerns. How is it doing that, Madam Speaker? Well, what we are doing is we are planning to invest an additional $2.5 billion in housing. And what does that look like, Madam Speaker? Well, $2.5 billion looks like an additional $1.5 billion for the Rapid Housing Initiative. This has landed with resounding success around the country, particularly in my city of Toronto, because what it allows us to do is to build housing and build it quickly so that we actually meet the very short supply of affordable housing in cities like mine. And because of the resounding success of the Rapid Housing Initiative over the last several months, Madam Speaker, what we've done is we've decided that we're going to commit to expanding it by $1.5 billion, which will allow us to have 4,500 new units, 25% of which will be dedicated for women, which is an important piece, Madam Speaker. There's also $600 million dedicated towards an affordable housing innovation fund, which will bring the total new units to over 30,000, and an additional $300 million will be dedicated to the Canada Housing Benefit to increase things like direct financial assistance to women and children who are fleeing violence. These are all critical initiatives, not just for my constituents in Parkdale Park, but indeed I think for all people in Canada, and indeed should be priorities for all parliamentarians. There's $1.3 billion that is being reallocated to speed up the construction, support, and repair of units. There's money that is being put in place to ensure that vacant properties will be taxed when they are owned by non-resident non-Canadians. And I insert this here because it relates to housing, but I also insert this because in the course of following today's debate, I've heard repeatedly that there seem to be not enough initiatives targeted at those who are living luxuriously, those who are very affluent or rich. This, in fact, is targeting exactly those individuals, and I highlight it for that reason, Madam Speaker. Another key component is that COVID has exacerbated what we've seen in terms of the, I'm working from home. Many of us are working from home right now. That trend will continue even as we exit out of this pandemic. That is liberated office space in cities like mine, like in Toronto. And what we propose in this budget is to support the conversion of some of that empty office space into affordable housing. And that's exactly what we'll do with this budget. Madam Speaker, the next subject I want to touch upon is really the flagship policy that is in this budget. And you heard the Minister of Finance articulate this quite clearly. She talked about the fact that childcare has arisen as an issue that has really climbed to the forefront. And I say this painfully aware of my gender, Madam Speaker, aware of the fact that it is men like me that have all of a sudden been sensitized to this priority. During this pandemic. I'm a man who has got his kids at home as we speak right now. They're about 15 feet away from me, going through online schooling, etc. And men like me have been challenged over these past 15 months. And I think that's a good thing because it's raised awareness about the importance of and given some momentum to the call for childcare. Yes, this is a 50-year-old call. You heard the Minister of Finance articulate that. But what she also articulated is very clearly that this isn't just a women's policy. This is an economic policy. It is an infrastructure policy that is indifferent to building roads or transit. By empowering childcare, what we will do is unleash economic potential. And that potential is something in the order of around 250,000 women, most likely women, because women still bear the burden of the predominant burden of childcare, will be liberated and emancipated such that they can participate more fully in the economy. That is an incredible statistic, Madam Speaker, joined by another incredible statistic, which is the $30 billion with a B, $30 billion investment that we are putting on the table to ensure that this becomes a reality. Yes, there are naysayers, Madam Speaker, and they said, well, Liberals have committed to this in the past and it hasn't come to fruition. Never before has this kind of dollar amount been allocated. And I would remind my fellow members of Parliament that Liberals came close to getting this across the finish line under Paul Martin and Ken Dryden's tenure around circa 2005. And that was a minority parliament that saw a universal childcare plan actually defeated, unfortunately, which led us to 9 years of Stephen Harper's Conservatives. I'm very hopeful that we don't see a repeat of that kind of history. And instead, in this minority parliament, we can see this important goal get across the finish line. What will it mean? It'll mean a 50% reduction in childcare costs as early as the end of next year, and getting childcare costs to literally $10 a day by 2025. Madam Speaker, I saw your signal, and I've figured out Zoom enough to know how to pin you on my screen, so I know I've got 2 minutes. In these last 2 minutes, what I want to do is just canvass some of the proposals that deal with systemic racism and systemic discrimination, a subject near and dear to my heart as a person of color, as somebody who believes in human rights and equality. What this budget will do, it will be transformative for Black entrepreneurs, for Black business owners, for Indigenous persons that want a firmer commitment to reconciliation and curing overrepresentation. What this budget will do is make real those commitments, and those have come to the fore during what we've seen during this pandemic. And Madam Speaker, I'll highlight a few additional initiatives. There's more money in this budget, around $26 million for immigration and refugee legal aid that affects people of color. There's $21 million for a specific racialized communities legal support fund that will get public legal education into the hands of racialized people. There is diversity in procurement, which we've never seen before outlined in a budget, Madam Speaker. And I want to give a shout out to the member from Whitby for all of the work he's done on this file, and the Minister of Procurement for getting behind this idea, where we will actually target procurement measures that help Indigenous and Black businesses, which is critical. There's money for disaggregated data so we understand the true nature of the problem. And there's $74 million for an Indigenous justice strategy. Madam Speaker, I can't get to all of the measures that I wanted to highlight, but there are a lot of supports for a lot of different needy sectors of the economy low-wage workers, small businesses, people that work in arts and culture, many of whom are my constituents. These are programs that I believe in. They will cost money, but the time is now to invest in Canadians and invest in building back better. And to the answer of whether we can afford this, I say very firmly we cannot afford not to do this. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I'm open for questions.
Questions et commentaires.